crowd surfed. It's the one and only time I've crowd surfed. Not that I wanted to. It's just when I finished the gig and put the banjo down, they just picked me up and just sent me across the muslin. And it was, yeah.
Forgive me for struggling to picture this, Dan. But,
yeah, frankly, so do I.
How did you start playing the banjo? What made you do it?
Yeah. Hey, you guys gave me the job, so you know. So I guess I wanted to play guitar more or less from like the age I was born. No, that's not right. From a very, very young age. And my parents relented, I think, when I was about 8 or 9 and got me guitar lessons. But I was always listening to kind of Irish folk stuff because my dad is from Liverpool, and like most people from Liverpool, his family are Irish. So I used to listen to Irish music a lot, and that's where I heard banjo. And when I was about 13, I thought, you know what, I'd really like to try it. So I got my parents to get me a banjo lesson as a kind of a trial, and Dad sat in the lesson. And this look of resignation came on his face as he realised, yes, I did like it, and yes, I did want to play it. So I got a banjo for Christmas. But I was very fortunate in a way because this was I think Skype might have just existed, but the whole thing of like having online lessons hadn't sort of started at all. So you really did need a teacher to be in the area to have lessons. And I mean, I've lived in Stafford, which is hardly a, hotbed of banjos, but George Davis, the legend, lived in Cannock, which is not very far away, and he is an utterly brilliant banjo player and teacher. So I was very lucky to have him. So I owe him an awful lot. But the interesting thing is I spent my sort of early childhood listening to what I now know to be tenor banjo, which is a completely different instrument to what I play.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So banjo isn't actually the instrument you fell in love with, or it is?
Well, exactly, yes, because it's one of those things where I just said I want to play banjo. My parents and I didn't know, as far as we were concerned, banjo was just banjo, And basically, yeah, it turned out that the instrument I play, 5-string banjo, is utterly not like a tenor banjo, really, at all. So I essentially took up the wrong instrument, Paloma.
That makes so much sense.
And I've been stuck with it ever since. So I ended up with this kind of candid way of playing jigs and reels in clawhammer, which is kind of frighteningly more complicated than just playing tenor banjo, but it was all a complete accident, really. It was all just born out of ignorance and not really knowing any better. And actually, the really hilarious moment when I realised was I was watching, there was a clip of load of Irish musicians, and there was a 5-string banjo player and a tenor banjo player side by side. And I said, that tenor banjo player isn't playing properly, because I thought like clawhammer was like the proper way. So I put this to George in my next lesson, and that's when all was revealed. But by this point, I've been playing for over a year.
Classic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about how you got into singing? Because you are a fantastic banjo player, obviously.
Thank you.
You are a brilliant guitar player, but you're also an absolutely fantastic singer. And what got you into all of that? What got you into singing? I know it's kind of a common thing among a lot of folk musicians that you just kind of get up and sing. Certainly not something that came naturally to me. So what's your story? How did you get involved in all of that?
I'm going to make my whole career sound like an accident here, but again, I sang in my band at school. So I formed a band at school when I was 14 or 15 or something with three lads who were great friends of mine and weren't particularly into folk music or anything, but kind of just we all fancied playing some music. And I ended up singing just because I thought we ought to do some songs, but I never really thought of myself as a singer. And I always had it in my head, I think, that when I went to university, I'd probably knock singing on the head and just concentrate on banjo and guitar. And what actually happened was we were doing a module called Vocal Group, which fairly obviously involved everybody singing. And Sandra Kerr, who was one of the tutors on the folk degree, mother of Nancy, of course, and just generally an all-round legend, she wrote the music for Backless. I mean, you know. And she actually sort of said, your voice sounds good.
Brilliant.
And I was like, oh, really? And as I said, at this point, I was thinking, I'm not a singer. I'm just, there are lots of singers on this degree. What do you need me to sing for? But she was very sort of encouraging, but brilliantly, she was encouraging, but she also gave me some very good advice, which was that some of my technique wasn't great, particularly breathing. I used to breathe in really weird places. So I'd be singing these big, long phrases on like one breath and like passing out. And she said...
That adds to the drama, doesn't it?
Indeed. And she said, you've got plenty of ability, but like literally just a couple of, tips would help a lot. So I did some stuff with Chris Coe and her and sort of worked on singing, and sort of gradually over time I thought, okay, maybe I'm a singer after all. I mean, even to this day I still think of it very much as a secondary thing. I sort of think if I lost my hands and couldn't play banjo or guitar, would I stand alone as a singer? I don't know, really. It's never come about, obviously, but I like singing. But if I'm really being honest, I still don't think I'm anything like I am on banjo, really. But as I say, it all happened a bit by accident. I didn't plan it particularly, but it just sort of happened.
Fantastic. There's a theme going on here. I'm going to call this interview Accidental Dan Walsh. That's not a very good title, actually, is it? It's a work in progress. I'll think of something.
I mean, I don't know whether that's telling the story of Urban Folk Quartet, maybe. I don't know. But
Probably as well.
Yeah.
So you spent a lot of time in Newcastle, didn't you?
I sure did, yeah.
You did. So can you tell me a little bit about your time there? You did the folk degree there. You were there for 3-4 years. Did you've stayed
4 years on the degree and another 3 years after.
Fantastic. Come on, tell me a little bit about your time there, because I know you have very fun memories of it.
Yeah, memories, stretching it. It was great. It was amazing. Yeah, it was. So, I mean, this really is a theme. So yet again, I didn't especially sort of think I'm longing to do the folk degree. To be honest, I didn't really think about university that much at all until Mum kind of said, you really need to think about what you're actually doing when school finishes. So I went on UCAS, I think is the website, and searched various things and essentially narrowed it down to 2 courses I thought looked good. And one of them was the folk degree, and one of them was a course at the University of Central Lancashire, which was called Music Practice, which was all about sort of performing, but also composition and sort of mixing up different genres and things, which I was always quite into even back then. And really, originally I thought that's where I'd probably go, because as much as I love folk music, I also like a lot of other stuff.
Sure. And
I thought, is 4 years of just folk music going to drive me insane? Going to regret saying that on camera, aren't I? But anyway, so I sort of was in. Yeah, absolutely. I was in 2 minds about it. But when I went to the audition, Alistair Anderson was doing the audition, and I mean, Alistair is the most inspirational figure in he's just extraordinary, because he's got so much enthusiasm. It just radiates from him when he talks and when he plays and when he performs. And so I was initially really impressed by him, but also the Sage Gateshead was where the audition was, which is, for those not in the know, is a glittering art centre on the River Tyne. Sorry, next to the River Tyne, not in the River Tyne, obviously. It's one of a kind. And
I'm just imagining underwater banjo.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, many people would say that's the best place for it. But I had this audition at the Sage, and I was just like, God almighty, this is incredible. And I was speaking to Alistair, and he was telling me about all the people who came in and did guest tutoring, people like Liz Carroll and
my hero.
Exactly. Well, mine too, and Martin Carthy and all these people. And I thought, holy Jesus, this is quite something. And he was saying, we've got this great fiddler from Shetland coming on the course, you and him together. Oh my God, it'd be amazing. And all this sort of stuff. And he was really into my playing, which was lovely. The final sort of factor was, I said to him, honestly, my slight concern is it all folk music? Like, is it okay for me to do some jazz or some, other stuff? And he just went, Yeah, God, yeah, that's great. And I was like, oh my God, I'm coming here. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. So that I made my mind up there and then. That's where I was. That's where I was going, and it was really exciting because I didn't grow up in a folk setting. So I grew up listening to sort of, and again, this is pre the internet being like the internet, like it is now. So like my source of folk music was the folk show on Radio 2 or the country show on Radio 2, and you know, just frantic Google searching. And we used to go on holiday to Ireland every year, me and my parents, and we'd always go to the local record CD shop and buy just things that looked good. But really to suddenly be surrounded by 20 people my own age who were great players from all over the country, all over the world, and were into the same stuff as me, it was fantastically exciting. And I mean, the folk degree has its faults, and it's got very polarized opinions on it. But I just sort of struggle to see how 100 young folkies gathering and playing music together and learning to get better at it and networking, I fail to see how that's not a good thing, really, to be honest. I just sort of struggle to see why that's not a good thing. And I think the session scene was fantastic. And like every week, you could, almost any night of the week, you could go out and play rip-roaring Scottish and Irish jigs and reels, or English songs or whatever, if you preferred that. I didn't really. So I did the sort of Scottish and Irish stuff, and just playing with 30 other people and getting rip-roaringly drunk, and being sort of in like settings where people wouldn't dream of listening to folk music. And that's what I really enjoyed, was playing in like quayside bars where people would just be out for a generic sort of night out, and they'd stumble across this session and loved it, absolutely loved it. And that for me was great, because folk music is brilliant music, and jigs and reels are so irresistible, and everybody enjoys them, whether they think they like folk music or not. They're just irresistible. So to introduce lots of people to them and make them realize that folk isn't just a weird cult that, you know, is inhabited by appalling dress sense, was great. It was really, really great to sort of spread the word. And that one phone call I remember in particular is I went to the loo at one of these places, and there was a guy on the phone to his mate, and he was like, mate, you got to get down to the quayside. There's these folk musicians. And you could tell the guy on the other end was going, what the are you on about? But, you know, that for me summed it up. It was brilliant. I really enjoyed all that.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It's better for my liver that those days are over, but it was good fun.
Yes, I have heard some wild stories about your time there. Maybe not the best time to get into the detail of that, right? So the next question is, this has kind of come up, but I'd like to get a little bit more into it. During your time at Newcastle, or even during your time studying banjo music before then, can you think of any particularly influential people that you came across throughout that time who really made a mark on your development or on your understanding of music?
In Newcastle?
Either
in general?
In Newcastle, before Newcastle, in the lead up to getting accepted into Newcastle. Is there anybody in particular, or a few people maybe that really spring to mind?
Yeah, there are, for lots of different reasons, actually. I mean, my first musical love was Paul Simon. And I think he remains a massive influence just in terms of his sheer creativity, really. Just forever exploring new genres. And I think doing it in such a way that it was still his music, but he just used different influences to tell that same story. And I think that's a massive influence on me, because I think there are relating it to banjo, I think there are other banjo players, Bela Fleck springs to mind, where, you know, he's played so many different genres on the banjo, and the banjo world really needed him to happen to kind of widen the scope of the instrument. But I think his approach is very different to mine, which is that I think his approach is very much like he's going to hear a style of music and he's going to learn exactly how those people play it and recreate that on the banjo. So like his Bach album, he basically plays it like classical musicians play Bach. When he did the African stuff, he did the same thing. You know, he's a great sort of emulator, I suppose, in that kind of a way. Whereas for me, I think it's more about sort of trying to play something that speaks from my heart, but sort of uses the different influences. So I think Paul Simon just massively, and as a songwriter as well. I mean, his lyric writing is just phenomenal as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Paul Simon's definitely up there. On a more banjo-specific level, Jerry O'Connor remains my utter idol, even though I did end up playing the wrong instrument. Because I think that he is just, I think to this day, you know, some of these sort of older legendary musicians, you admire them as legendary musicians, but there probably comes a time when they get overtaken and, you know, the young lot take over. I still think he's the best. I really do. I mean, I hear so many musicians play, but I still don't hear anybody who plays triplets as crisply as he does, or ornaments as exquisitely as he does. And when I'm doing my clawhammer arrangements of that stuff, he's always the man who's in my mind, to be honest. So he would definitely be up there. I think that from the Indian side as well, actually, I've really enjoyed a few of those musicians. And Debashish Bhattacharya, who plays Calcutta Slide, which is a slide guitar he invented. His influence is massive, because I think I'm never going to be a like authentic Indian musician, partly because I'm not Indian, but also just not, you know, I mean, you have to study for years and hours, and then clearly that's not going to happen. But I think his way of sort of fusing it again in a way that's tasteful and sort of loyal to both genres, if you like, was great. Horselips I loved because I loved the use of traditional melodies as riffs in songs. I just love the way that they, even though some of it probably sounds a little bit dated now, I love the sort of the way that they can involve those melodies and do it in a way that creates a whole new music. I think I always love that. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but to be honest, another massive influence was Joe Broughton.
Wow, there you go.
Because when I was...
I'm so surprised.
I know, indeed. Well, it just makes him sound old, really. But when I was about, I want to say 13, 14, my mum took me to see the Albion Band just because she saw them in the brochure for the Gatehouse in Stafford and thought, you know, Dan's into folk music, let's give it a try. And I just couldn't believe this guy. He was phenomenal. Just, he really was. And just the fire in it and the sort of flair and the frankly outright showing off was a great, like, I just loved that. So I definitely had that in me as well. And then, yes, of course, years later ended up in a band with him, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. And what a lovely way to connect those two stories. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So Dan, do you think you could play us something?
Yeah, I'm going to just adjust that slightly so you can see the banjo. So we talked about Irish musicians earlier. I should have mentioned Sharon Shannon, who I know you have some experience with as well.
Oh, yeah. We played with her in Galicia when we did the recording of the DVD. She was absolutely incredible. She's just got such an amazing groove, playing anything, whatever style of tune she plays just sounds awesome, doesn't it? It's ridiculous.
She's the best. And I met her at Costa del Folk. And she saw me playing in a session and was very complimentary, which I was a dribbling fanboy, I think, at that point. But we became Facebook friends, and I got in touch when I started doing these split screen collaborations during lockdown. And much to my surprise, she agreed. And this was the tune we played. So I'll
Fantastic.
Give you a bit of this. This is Music for a Found Harmonium.
Fantastic. Nice one, Dan. Great tune. Great tune. Do you have a song for us by any chance that you could do?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll play you. I'll play you one of my songs. I suppose another influence actually would be someone like Jez Lowe, because I am a songwriter as well, and I actually hate writing songs, but I love the end result. I think that's the thing. I always hate the process, but I love it when you've got a song that you're happy with at the end of it. And I think what I like about his writing particularly is that he writes about things that are relevant and personal. It isn't just another, some mythical event that happened in 1750 involving a sheep and a sister. It's sort of stuff that's very kind of relevant and kind of universal and yet utterly personal at the same time. I think that's what I like about it. And he writes a lot about the area that he knows. And I suppose I grew up in Stafford, and there are actually quite a few of my songs that are inspired by just my experiences with the place. I suppose it's just, a lot of people who are great friends and very supportive and all the rest of it, and the kind of good and bad things about being from a small-ish town, I suppose. And this one I actually wrote. It's called Still a Town, and it's sort of about the the decline of the high street. And Stafford has really suffered in recent years. It looks, it's the town centre looks a bit of a ghost town, to be honest. And obviously, I can't imagine the last year has helped one iota with that. But I think there are a lot of great people around who still make sure that stuff happens and that events happen, and there's still a great spirit there. So yes, this is Still a Town.
Outside the bank, but to those who meet and greet with the tens of people on the streets, we bring hope to the old town. I don't want to see this place go down. It's tight and dry, but there are those who want to pull it round. It hasn't run into the ground, but as long as there's still a town. I don't want to see this place go down. It's tight and dry, but there are those who want
Thank you so much. That's brilliant. I've just remembered music for Found Harmonium, the tune that you played before. That's the encore that I used to do with Carlos for 8 years. Yeah, so I know it very well.
Penguin
In
Cafe
fact,
Orchestra.
Yeah, in fact, I think I even played it with Sharon Shannon. So there you go.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, a little connection there between us before we even knew each other.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, the other one was Joe, I suppose.
Yes. We'll come back to all of that in a minute. But one thing I did want to ask you about is before you joined UFQ, you had a very successful duo with Will Pound. Didn't you?
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about that? How did you meet? What was the inspiration behind your music? What kind of things did you guys do?
Yeah, quite a bit, I think. So Will was at university with me. He was in the year below me, I think, if I remember rightly. And sort of every year on the folk degree, when a new intake comes in, there's usually some sort of opening night thing where everybody gets together for a big session. It sort of gives you a chance to get to know each other, but also kind of see what everyone does. And I remember it very vividly. There was some Scottish tune or other, I forget which one. And midway through, all of a sudden, I became aware of this phenomenally loud, crazy note from a harmonica. And I was like, oh, right, we've got a harmonica player, cool. And then he launched into some crazy playing, and he of all the musicians I think I've ever met, I'm not sure there's many with the instant wow factor of Will. There is just something about his playing and watching him play that he's just kind of captivating. And I thought, wow, that's great. And I got to know Will, which is always an experience. I guess, we sort of got to jamming now and again. And it gradually just it went from being something that happened now and again to just being a proper duo. I think actually what happened was I had a gig in Newcastle at the Bridge Hotel.
Don't tell me it was an accident.
The gig wasn't. Well, yeah, the gig was actually, yeah. So I had a gig at the Bridge Hotel and was with Will that afternoon. As is often the way with folk degree, we were sitting in a pub and instruments came out in the middle of the day, much to everybody's delight. And
sounds great.
And we jammed a couple of songs, and I thought, Will, do you want to just jump on the gig tonight? I thought for a couple of songs, and then I think he actually just did the entire gig with me. And we thought, well, that was fun. And so Will being Will, we recorded a tune for a folk degree sampler CD, I seem to remember, and Will passed it on to a guy called Simon Kerr, who I know you know yourself from Banter and Edward II and things, really just to see if he thought it was any good. And Simon loved it so much that he said, I'd like to manage you. Fantastic. And Will said, do you do that? And he went, no, but I'll give it a go. So Simon basically Simon decided to take it upon himself to manage us. And I think it was also because Will and I were just finishing university and kind of like, oh my God, how are we going to make a living? Help. So I think Simon sort of had that in mind as well. And he just contacted, the great thing about Simon is he just knows everybody. I mean, everybody. So he just contacted a load of festivals and said, you need to have these guys on. And they just went, yeah, all right. So we ended up with this wonderful summer of festivals. And we kind of, I think we made a bit of a splash because we were so mad. Because it was, I mean, Walsh and Pound was not the most subtle act in the world. It was lots of energy and lots of, frankly, ridiculously tasteless playing at times, but also very exciting.
That's not true. I saw you guys. You were brilliant.
Well, thank you. Yes. Oh no, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it was a wow thing because I think both of us are very exuberant musicians and both have that thing that Joe had and has, which is that fire and that kind of virtuoso-y, show-offy thing. And we had that in spades. And I think we got away with it a bit because we were so young as well. So I think it did kind of. We were a very untypical act, and I think therefore we did kind of make a bit of a splash. And also in those days, I was playing a lot of pubs in the Northeast, so my kind of talking to audiences was was quite daring in those days, because that was how you survived in some of the pubs I played. And I think I still kind of did a bit of that on stage, which again, I think caught people by surprise a bit. So as an act, it had quite an impact, I think, which put us both on the map, and that was great. And we had some wonderful times, some brilliant shows. And the music, I guess there was blues, there was bluegrass, there was just a bit of everything. And we recorded an album which a lot of people liked, and I think we got nominated for one or two things, and it was great. It was a lot of fun, and but it was completely mad. I mean, it was a completely mad act. It was so over the top. It was ridiculous. I mean, I remember jumping off drum risers and all kinds of daft things, and it was great. And it was great fun. Yeah, it was great. And as I say, for both of us, it was our start really, because up to that point we were kicking around Newcastle and we'd done gigs and things, but nothing like we did after that. Yeah, it was great.
Brilliant. Well, very deserving, both of you, of that opportunity. So
thank you.
It's great to have you both on the scene, definitely. You know. So after Will and Pound, that's not what it's called.
Will and Pound.
Will and Pound. Well, you know, he's so good. He's like both duo members in Welsh and Pound even. Yeah. After Welsh and Pound, where did your journey take you? What happened?
To you, I think. Well, yeah, that was a funny old time actually, because the duo sort of came to a fairly natural end, because we'd done 3 years, I think, and we'd started recording a second album. We had this feeling that it wasn't really as good as the first album, nor was it different enough to kind of, it was just a less good version of the first one. I mean,
second albums are tricky. Really hard.
And I think we hadn't really done anything else over 3 years, because we'd even done all the Live Music Now stuff together and everything like that. So we weren't really working with anybody else. And I think we both needed a bit of a change. And I think, but the only trouble with that, of course, is that you end a reasonably successful act and then you think, oh God, you know, what do you do now? So I wanted to do loads of solo stuff. And I think we both had music that we wanted to do without the other, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
And so I got solo stuff, but in a way it's quite hard to begin with to get solo stuff, because you've been in a successful duo. So as far as a lot of people are concerned, they'd be like, well, why would we only want half of it, I suppose. And I think solo me is very different from Walsh and Pound, but I can see why people wouldn't know that, you know, at the time. Yeah. So I was trying to sort of make headway with the solo thing and stuff. And I still play with Alistair Anderson, legendary Alistair Anderson as well, and bits and bobs. But largely I had a big solo tour, I think, at the beginning of 2013, that would be, I think. Very small scale, because I basically just wanted to kind of enjoy myself and just played loads of tiny places all over the country, and that was great. But during that time, I got a message from one Joe Broughton.
Never heard of him.
Yes, indeed. And he sent me a message because we met at Pretty Folk Festival, where Walsh and Pound were on before Urban Folk Quartet, and I must admit that was a really good gig. I do remember that one. It was great.
Remember that one.
A lot of fun with the audience and things. So that was good fun. And Joe messaged me and said, you know, don't know if you remember me. I was like, oh, how little you know. But he said, you know, don't know if you remember me, but we have met. And I was wondering if you were interested in working with me. And I sort of tried to reply in such a way that I gave the impression that I was very, very keen, but not sounding like a complete loser who was just, you know, a kind of a shameless fan. And the truth was as well, I really needed a new project, because I mean, I'd done the Will thing, and then I didn't really have, I had Alistair, but we didn't do that much because he's in his 70s, you know, so he wasn't going to be touring all the time. And I could really have done with another act anyway. And then I thought, well, if it involved Joe, then that's great. So I replied and said, yeah, definitely. But I didn't really think it would be the Urban Folk Quartet, because obviously I thought, well, you've already got 4 people. So I mean, you know, what would it be? So Joe came for a drink in Stafford and said,
I remember the day.
Yeah. And he said, would you be interested in joining the Urban Folk Quartet? And I was like, and in my head, I was just going, oh my God, yes. And I was sort of trying to play it cool and be like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. And I was trying to ask questions to make it seem like I really cared, but truth be told, I didn't. I knew I wanted to join the band because it was a great band. But I was trying to make out that I was sort of, you know, had stipulations, which I didn't really. But then I went round to your house and did not officially an audition, but I guess that's what it was really. And then joined the band, and still stuck in it now.
Hey.
But it was great, and as I say, the timing couldn't have been better really, because I was so ready for it, and I was really ready to do something different, because I think I'd done a lot. I'd always played solo over the years, I'd always come back to solo, and as I said, I'd had the will thing, but I was very keen to do something different and stretch my musical sort of muscles. And as if that wasn't enough, I really wanted to play guitar again, because I didn't really play guitar in Walsh and Pam, so I kind of had barely touched a guitar for a long time. So it was great to sort of do that again. And I think because Frank is an infinitely better guitar player than I am, because he's a guitarist and I'm not, it was great learning the parts that he had done before, because it pushed me to play things that I'd not played before and get a lot better at flat picking and doing things like Cuban rhythms and stuff. I had never done that, so it was great to sort of as a vehicle, both to express myself but also to kind of really increase my my range of stuff. That was great. I enjoyed it, and plus, I mean, the three musicians in the band are they're okay, I suppose.
Oh, Dan, you always make me feel so good about myself.
Well, I do my best. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. So come on, you've been on tour a lot, with various different acts, with solo. You've traveled all over the world. So first of all, what is the best country to tour in? I know what my answer is. New Zealand. Oh, I haven't been there yet. Okay,
hands
come
down.
on, spill the beans. What's so good about it? I do remember you saying you were going to tour New Zealand, and it was the second time that you'd been.
Yeah.
And I do remember a comment along the lines of, don't expect me to buy a return flight or something like that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, do you know something? That was a glorious accident as well. I think about it, because no, I suppose it wasn't really, but it was just, I didn't expect it to actually happen. So I have a very, very good school friend who moved to New Zealand when we finished school, and so I was kind of keen to go and see him. And then I saw online that someone I knew had done some gigs there, and I thought maybe I could do some gigs there. So I think one night I Googled kind of, I don't know, New Zealand folk gigs or something to that effect, sent them all an email, and much to my surprise, they were all rather keen. So it went from this kind of whim of, I'll just send some emails, I'm sure it won't happen, to, oh Christ, I'm actually going to New Zealand. And in those days, I hadn't actually traveled very much. I think I'd been to Canada and India, but both of those have been organized by someone else. So the whole thing with like visas and all that, I didn't have a clue you had to do any of that. And I applied for Auckland Folk Festival and thankfully got it, because they sorted my visa. If they hadn't, God knows what I'd have done, to be honest. But I went to New Zealand, and oh my God, it's the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. It is just unbelievable. And the people are just fantastic. The atmosphere is so uniquely wonderful. And from my point of view, it was just the biggest success I'd ever had, because I played Auckland Folk Festival first, and because New Zealand has a population of about 9, all of the folk fans in New Zealand were at this festival. So in my first gig, I reached everybody really quickly. So that was great, and I sold out of CDs on the first gig. So I had to order some more CDs, because I thought, well, I've still got 15 gigs left. So I ordered some more CDs from England, and I ended up on television on Good Morning TV, which is their equivalent of BBC Breakfast, I suppose.
Brilliant.
And I ended up there was 10cc and me on this Good Morning TV. And I told Tom, my school friend, that I was going on Good Morning TV, and he went, no. And he was like, I just watched Brad Pitt on there. And that is you. And it was
stands to reason that you should be next then, doesn't it, really?
It was hilarious. And I did all these wonderful, and I suppose the great thing about being a musician who isn't like massively famous is that you get to play all the weird places. So when you're really famous, you just play Auckland and Wellington, and then you go home. Whereas I got to play all the far out flung places that even, frankly, most Kiwis aren't aware of. So I played all manner of things, and I played this gig in the Muscle Inn in Golden Bay on the northwest tip of the South Island, which is the most, I mean, even for New Zealand, this is remote. I mean, seriously remote. But people come from miles around to see gigs there. I don't know how they do it. They get some really quite big names in, and they don't charge very much to come to the gig, but you get this kind of, this looks like this big wooden shack in the middle of nowhere, and they just feed you mussels, and it's great. But I played this gig, and it was a very civilized gig, actually. So there was just a seated audience, and it was the standard 245s thing, and that was all fine. And then about 15 minutes from what I thought would be the end, I played Call Me Al, and a group of people decided it was the time to get up and dance. At which point I thought, well, I can't finish now. Like, this is great fun. So I just carried on for a bit. And I never normally drink on a gig, but people started putting beer in front of me. So I just...
But you just have to if they
so
do that, don't you? It's rude to leave it. Let's be honest.
Quite. And in the end, the second half lasted 2.5 hours. And I was playing songs that I hadn't the notion I knew. And I remember seeing this 80-year-old guy stood on a table doing this, and it was just completely crazy. And they were chanting my name and giving me drink and all the rest of it. And I crowd surfed. It's the one and only time I've crowd surfed. Not that I wanted to. It's just when I finished the gig and put the banjo down, they just picked me up and just sent me across the Muslin. And it was yeah.
Forgive me for struggling to picture this, Dan. But
yeah, frankly, so do I. And not just because I was drunk. But it was absolutely surreal. And the hilarious thing was I went back a couple of years later and it wasn't quite as crazy as that. But the same 80-year-old guy was there, which I didn't realise until I told the story on stage, and then he put his hand up and said that was me.
That's fantastic. Am I remembering this wrong, or did you actually meet my old music teacher in New Zealand as well?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. Radio New Zealand.
Yeah, because Chris Atley he just won a competition for composing some colossal piece.
Yeah.
And he was being interviewed on the radio, and you were there as well. And I can't remember whether you sent me a message or he sent me a message. But anyway, the both of you were together in this radio station on the opposite side of the world, and I just got this message through on my phone going, "Wow, that's quite a surreal set of events."
It is. Do you know what? New Zealand's amazing for that, though. Like you just get people. Like I played in a place called Oamaru, which is on the South Island, very remote, and two people just walked in who run the Ram Folk Club in Thames Ditton in Surrey, which is one of the biggest folk venues in England. I was like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, this is just like, there is just something about, I suppose Australia and New Zealand is so, obviously there's so many Brits there. But New Zealand, I think New Zealand's always my first answer, really. There are other places I've loved and adored, and I could name many of them, but New Zealand always stands out, I think.
Awesome, brilliant. Okay, who would you say is the most underrated musician that you know and respect?
Oh, that's a question. God, I don't know actually. It's hard to say. This is a bit of a left field choice. I always adored Kirsty MacColl, and I think Kirsty MacColl is kind of so known for Fairy Tale of New York and maybe New England, which she didn't even write, that I think people miss just how amazing her other stuff was and her own songs. And again, like Paul Simon, witty, insightful, humorous, poignant, all at the same time. And again, a massive range of influences, like the Latin influence stuff towards the end of, sadly, her life, was just fantastic. And I don't think people realise that. So while people have heard of her, I don't think people rate her as highly as they should, because I think actually the level of talent she had was out of this world. So I think she would be up there. I don't know. I suppose there's a difference between underrated and not very well known. I suppose. Do you know what I mean? I suppose there's that. I mean, I can name you plenty of artists who are not very well known because most of my music is very unknown. But in terms of actually underrated, as in sort of underappreciated for how good they are, I don't quite know. To be honest, I would actually put Jez Lowe in that as well, because I think he's probably such a killer songwriter and has written so many songs that people do and don't even know it's him. And I think that there's other bands who are probably more known for writing songs that everybody sings. And yet I think he's chronically underappreciated. And probably another one who's underappreciated, like, again, given his level of ability and what he's associated with, is John Sheehan, Irish fiddle player John Sheehan, because I think because he played in the Dubliners for so long, and people associate the Dubliners with the Wild Rover and Seven Drunken Nights and that kind of stuff, it's overlooked just what a killer fiddler he is and violin player he is, and like his solo albums are fantastic. And he's a great classical, and you're obviously much more knowledgeable than me, but his classical playing as well and his jazz playing is fantastic. Like he did a gypsy jazz thing with a couple of Norwegian guys who, again, I hadn't heard of, and he's a phenomenal musician actually. So yeah, there's a few there, but as I say, it's more just I know lots of musicians who no one else knows.
Sure.
Generally.
If you were going to recommend one artist or one album right now that you're particularly into, who would that be?
I would probably plump for a band called Mishra.
Okay.
Who include on banjo Kate Griffin, who I had the honour / terror of teaching when she was at Sheffield University. Yeah, I mean, because I teach a lot of people, and usually many of them start as beginners, and those who have played a bit might be quite good. But I remember with her, I think her partner at the time emailed me and said, "I'd like to buy a banjo lesson with you for my girlfriend for her birthday," which is very sweet. And I said, "Okay, does she play already?" kind of thing. And he said, "Yeah, a bit, So I prepared a few things, thinking at best she'll have just, maybe mastered a couple of tunes or something. And then they came round to my house in Stafford, and I said, "Just to give me an idea, would you mind playing something just so I can sort of see where you're at?" And she played a Bulgarian tune. And as she finished playing, and I was just like, "Oh, I see, right." Right, well, what I had in mind is probably not for you. And then when she went to university, she asked for me as her tutor. So I taught her, and just the most phenomenal player. And the only battle, to be honest, I'm probably going to embarrass her now, but the only battle in university, to be honest, was just getting her to realise how good she actually was. Because she played with this sort of slight shyness and sort of, unsureness. And I was just like, you do realise what you're doing is incredible. And then, and she got into all this Indian stuff, which I think originally was my influence, but she's got much more deeply into it than me, and she ended up in an Indian folk ensemble, I think, at university. Fantastic. So Mishra are basically a mix of kind of Americana folk, a bit of British folk, and Indian. And the first track on the album is called Road, Dust and Honey, and I can't help but hate her for it, because it's basically the song I wanted to write. In that I've written lots of tunes that include a bit of Indian influence, and I think I've got quite good at doing that. But I always wanted to write a song that had that bit of that in it, that didn't sound crap, that didn't sound very contrived. And you know what it's like, we talk about this in the band all the time, where you don't want to write
the fact that I actually thought of Thriller first.
Yes, and the video and all, yeah. But I think we talk about not wanting to produce something that sounds heavily contrived. We don't want it to sound like, let's take a Latin beat and mix it with this for no reason at all. That's the thing we're always trying to avoid. And that was the thing I was trying to avoid with an Indian influenced song. As an idea, I liked it, but I didn't want it to sound like frankly, an English guy trying to do something that he doesn't, shouldn't really be doing. And then when they did Road, Dust and Honey, I was like, oh, for God's sake, she's gone and got there first. So Mishra, would definitely be my... I'm ashamed to say I've actually forgotten the name of the album. The Loft Tapes. That's it, the Loft Tapes.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we'll be able to put
definitely recommend that.
We'll put a link underneath. Okay. Fantastic. And our very last question for today, Dan. A slightly loaded one, but one that I'm sure you can summarize in a few minutes. What does music mean to you?
A great deal. I mean, I suppose for me personally, from an incredibly early age, for as long as I can remember, it was my passion. I don't have that many hobbies, to be honest. Music and football, basically, are my two passions in life. And I think clearly I was much better at one than the other. But I think with me, football player. Yeah, exactly. You saw the kick-ups. I think I think music, just from a very early age, gave me an excitement that nothing else did. And I think as time went on, I knew that it was going to be my life's work in a way. And I think particularly when the banjo came along, because guitar was interesting really, because I took up guitar thinking that would be the thing. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it and I practiced and I certainly got into it. But I mean, there were guys at school who were better guitarists than me, and it was a hobby and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't the overwhelming thing that I thought it would be. And for whatever reason, the banjo just filled that role.
Yeah.
And I think I don't like not being good at things, which is a shame because I'm not very good at lots of things.
And I have exactly the same experience.
But I think with banjo, there was a kind of, George, my teacher, always said that my gift, if you like, was my sheer want to do it and to get that good. It wasn't like I was born with magic fingers that could play the banjo. It was a want to do it. And I think that because I'm terrified of failure, I'm probably being very over-revealing here, but I think with banjo, because I had the freedom to practice at home and play all the terrible notes that you have to play in order to get to where you want to get to, there was a kind of freedom around that I felt free to just go for it. And this was going to be the thing that I was going to master, and nothing was going to stop me doing that. And thankfully, my parents were wonderful and very supportive and very patient. So for me personally, it's my form of expression. Guitar is a tool I use to make music. Banjo is my voice. And it's how I express myself. Going on stage is a thing I know how to do and where I feel comfortable. So from a very personal point of view, that's what it means. On a more universal level, I just think that it is so utterly priceless, and it's so much more than just a kind of tack on that's nice if it can be afforded, but it's not essential. Yeah, it is actually. And I think that with my work through music charities and independently, playing in care homes and special schools and all that sort of stuff, music is the difference between someone having a life and not having a life. You know, I've seen people in rehabilitation centers after big nervous breakdowns who've said explicitly, music is the reason that I've recovered. Music is the reason that I'm now able to talk. You know, I played in mental health units where guys, they suddenly had a focus and a reason to talk and to communicate. And they didn't play themselves, but the music gave them that. And people with dementia, is well documented that music suddenly makes them remember who they are and talk about things. And I could talk till I'm blue in the face about that. But I just think all round, it is the most powerful tool we have to reach the most number of people. And for me, that is what it is. And it's so much more than just a good time and something that's, you know, okay if you can afford it. It's so much more than that. And I suppose, as I say, for me personally, it's obviously my particular hobby and my particular talent, but I think way beyond that, it's you know, it's an incredibly powerful tool. And you know, everyone has songs that make them laugh, cry, remember something. You know, nobody I know doesn't have that, and for me, that's probably all you need to know.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. So just to finish today's interview, could you choose your favorite UFQ track for us, please?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, there's a few. I suppose in a way I'd probably plump for the On. And I think that's partly because it was I think it was probably the first thing we all arranged together. So for me personally, I suppose joining the band, it has a kind of special place for me because it was the first thing I was really a big part of arranging. I think also within the 6 or 7 minutes that it encompasses an awful lot of what the band's about. So I think the riff on the first tune is absolutely killer. And the tunes, all 3 of the tunes I like. And the last tune's completely mental. And that's a lot of fun as well. And is eye-wateringly difficult to play on banjo. So that's, and I'm sure, yeah. Thanks, Joe. And the middle tune, I suppose, speaks more to kind of what I do and that sort of banjo tune that I tend to write and tend to play. So within all of that, there's a kind of, it just encompasses everything, I think, of what the band is about. And as I say, as an added bonus, it sort of just reminds me of those early days when I still enjoyed it.
That's not funny, Dan.
No, I know. And obviously not true, just for clarification.
Fantastic. Dan, thank you so much for your time. We will seamlessly go into the on.
Fantastic. Great to see you.
Great to see you too.